My name is Vivian. I just turned 30 recently, and I got married to my husband Leo a year and a half ago. Leo, who I love, and have always wanted to marry, proposed to me and we got married without a hitch. The two of us were filled with hope for the future, planning to create many memories together and support each other in life. Looking back now, I was truly happy at that time. The first signs of trouble in my initially smooth married life started to appear around 3 months into the marriage. I received a sudden call from my mother-in-law asking me to come to her house. My husband had expressed his desire for me to be a homemaker, so after marriage I spent my days taking care of household chores. Of course, my mother-in-law was aware of this, so when I received a message from her, I quickly replied, "I'll come right away," and headed to my in-laws' house. Upon arriving at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law was waiting for me at the entrance. Although she usually responded to my greetings on that day, she completely ignored me. Not only that, but she urged me to enter quickly, saying, "Hurry in! There are various things I want you to do today," and guided me into the living room. What exactly do you want me to do, Mom?" As I asked, my mother-in-law sat down and said, "There are dishes piled up in the kitchen sink from breakfast and lunch. Please start by washing those." With a gesture that practically indicated I should go to the kitchen, she pointed her chin in that direction. Huh? I had never been asked to do such a thing before, so I was bewildered and frozen in place. Seeing my confusion, my mother-in-law then, "What are you standing around for? Couldn't you hear me? I asked you to do the dishes, didn't I?" She said this with an obviously sour expression, and I was frightened by her behavior, which I had never seen before. "Oh, okay." Saying that, I headed towards the kitchen. I quickly made my way to the kitchen and stood in front of the sink. My heart was pounding so loudly that it felt like it might leap out of my chest. I had never seen my mother-in-law like that before. When we had visited my in-laws' house a few times before with my husband, she had always been kind and cheerful. So why today, of all days? It occurred to me that there was such a thing as harassment against daughters-in-law. Could it be that I was actually experiencing something I had only seen in melodramatic daytime TV shows? When I thought about it, I suddenly felt my blood run cold. I couldn't afford to further upset my mother-in-law. With that in mind, I hurriedly finished washing the dishes. "I've finished washing the dishes, Mom." When I said that, my mother-in-law, "Oh, well, next is laundry, and when that's done, you can clean up. Make sure you also get the stairs," she said, then started lying down on the living room sofa. Even though she told me all of a sudden, I didn't know where they kept the cleaning supplies, and I figured there might be specific ways to do laundry for this household. While those considerations in mind, I turned to my mother-in-law. Mom. But before I could continue, my mother-in-law snapped back. "You're so annoying. I just gave you instructions, didn't I? You're a daughter-in-law. You should be able to handle this much. And let me tell you, my daughter, who is younger than you, does everything perfectly." She yelled like that and went back to sleep. In that brief moment, I stood there in shock. I couldn't understand why I was being compared to my sister-in-law. With a sense of frustration lingering, I reluctantly proceeded to do the cleaning and laundry as instructed. In the end, it seemed my way of doing things didn't meet her standards. I was made to redo both the laundry and cleaning tasks. Even during that time, my mother-in-law, "Oh dear, if it were Everly, she could handle this. Why can't you, even though you're older? You can't even do household chores properly. You're a failure as Leo's wife. It's embarrassing." She grumbled such things, and at that moment I sensed why my mother-in-law had suddenly become so strict with me. I'm sure my mother-in-law reached a point where she couldn't stand comparing me to her daughter, whom she considered the best. Everly is my husband's sister and my sister-in-law. She got married before us and lives with her husband's parents. We didn't usually see each other. I met her once at a wedding, and she was very bright. She was easy to talk to. We didn't have very deep conversations, so I don't really know her that well, but both my mother-in-law and father-in-law are quite fond of her. My father-in-law was impressed when he saw my sister-in-law wearing an evening gown at my wedding.
"Everly is so cute, isn't she? She might even outshine the bride."
He even says something like that. My mother-in-law agrees with this, but my sister-in-law... Hey, you're being rude to Vivian. Both my husband and I laughed it off as a joke, but to be honest, I was a bit shocked. Because of this, I didn't have much of a relationship with my sister-in-law, Everly. However, as my mother-in-law and father-in-law started comparing us, my impression of my sister-in-law worsened. About 3 months after getting married, I experienced my first encounter with the daughter-in-law treatment for my mother-in-law. I immediately went home and discussed it with my husband. "Hey, today your mom called me and asked me to go to your parents' house. I helped with the housework, but she kept complaining about everything. Plus, she kept comparing me to Everly. Can't you talk to your mom about it?" Then my husband said,
My mother did that to you? Well, I'll talk to my mom about it too, alright?
The way he said it did bother me a bit. But at that point, I thought that if my husband addressed it properly, my mother-in-law would stop with the blatant harassment towards me. So I decided to ask him for help. However, when my husband did talk to my mother-in-law, it only made her treat me even more harshly. I started getting called to my in-laws' house frequently, where I was given various household chores and even had to handle extensive shopping trips all on my own. Each time this happened, I would consult with my husband, and initially he was supportive, but...
"Alright, I'll talk to my mom about it."
He said that to me before, but as time went on, he started saying things like,
"Again? I've already talked to her, and honestly, aren't you just being overly sensitive about this?"
He started making comments like that. And to top it off, whenever I brought up my mother-in-law in conversation, he would let out an exasperated sigh, seeming bothered by it.
"Hey, Mom was probably saying that for your sake, right? Don't you think you should take it a bit more seriously and make an effort to improve?"
He says such terrible things without hesitation. Huh? Seriously? We've only been married for about a year, and yet, is he taking his mother's side over me? Thinking that way, I suddenly felt empty inside, bypassing feelings of anger and sadness, reaching a state of emptiness. From then on, whenever my husband and I went to in-laws' house together, my mother-in-law started giving me household instruction as if it were a matter of course. Perhaps because she was confident that my husband was on her side, she unrelentingly piled household chores on me, while my husband and his parents would sit in the living room drinking tea or doing whatever they pleased. It became a routine, and when the tea and snacks ran out, "Vivian, you really don't pay attention, do you? If you see it's running low, make sure to bring more in advance, okay?" She made such snide remarks, and as for my husband,
"Vivian, could you get me a refill of tea? Make it a bit stronger than usual."
He started jerking me around just like my mother-in-law without a care in the world. My father-in-law said nothing and treated me like a servant, just like my mother-in-law and husband.
"Vivian, we're out of cigarettes. Go buy some for me."
Such demands were quite common. I mean, couldn't he buy them himself? Both my husband and my mother-in-law asked for various things like tea, snacks, and more, expecting me to do everything. I thought about getting angry, but in this situation with no support, I realized there was nothing I could do, so I reluctantly accepted it. I had given up, and it was challenging to change the situation. One day, a year and a half into our marriage, I was at my in-laws' house as usual. Recently, my mother-in-law had been summoning us on my husband's days off, and I was forced to go along with him. I was pregnant at this time, just entering the late stages of pregnancy. Since entering the late stages, my health hadn't been great. Honestly, if possible, I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house at all. Since finding out about the pregnancy, I ended up going to my in-laws' house more frequently. As for my mother-in-law, "I have to teach you various things as a mother, you know." For some reason, she was strangely enthusiastic about it. However, in reality, she didn't actually teach me anything about childbirth or childcare. I was simply made to do household chores at my in-laws' house. Of course, neither my husband nor my father-in-law helped. They just watched TV or played on their phones. Even while I was doing household chores as instructed by my mother-in-law, I would occasionally experience abdominal pain and discomfort. I would break into a cold sweat, and to be honest, it was a struggle just to remain standing. However, my mother-in-law would observe me in this state. "You know, Everly managed to do household chores properly even while being pregnant, right? Compared to her, Vivian, aren't you being a bit too lazy?" Saying this, I was urged to do the housework. Maybe my morning sickness wasn't that bad in the early stages of my pregnancy, sure. However, now that I was in the later stages of pregnancy, my belly had become heavy, and even standing was causing discomfort due to the constant tightening sensation. A few hours later, while I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my abdomen, causing me to crouch down. At that moment, the front door swung open. "I'm home!" A loud voice echoed through the living room, catching the attention of my husband and father-in-law. "I'm back! Where's Mom?" Voices conversing reached my ears, and I soon realized that my sister-in-law had returned. Her footsteps gradually approached. "Mom, what's for dinner today?" My sister-in-law entered the kitchen, and upon seeing me crouched there, she opened her eyes wide in surprise. "Huh? Vivian, what's wrong?" Saying that, she hurried over to me. "Sorry, I have a little stomach ache." As I said this, my sister-in-law noticed my stomach. "Hey, Vivian, could it be that you're pregnant?" she asked awkwardly. "Huh? Didn't Leo tell you? I'm already 8 months along." When I found out I was pregnant and entered the stable period, my husband had said he would inform you, so I had assumed you already knew. Then my sister-in-law started trembling nervously and turned bright red before leaving the kitchen. "Wait, Mom, where are you?" My sister-in-law called for her mother in a loud voice. Then my mother-in-law, who was probably napping upstairs, noticed her voice and came carefree down the stairs. "Oh, Everly, you're back. Welcome home. It's been a while since we've seen each other. I'm so happy to see you." Saying that, my mother-in-law tried to embrace my sister-in-law, but my sister-in-law pushed her away. "Eh? Everly?" In response to my bewildered mother, my sister-in-law asked in a cold tone, "Hey, Mom, why is Vivian cooking all by herself, even though she's pregnant with such a big belly?" At that moment, it seemed my mother-in-law realized that my sister-in-law was not on her side. Her face turned pale rapidly. Well, you see, Vivian insisted on doing it herself." "Huh? There's no way that's true, right? Being in the late stages of pregnancy is tough, even when you're just standing, you know." "Because I've experienced pregnancy, I understand, you know." Everly shouted at my mother-in-law with an intense and forceful tone. My mother-in-law, who had always cherished and spoiled her daughter, must have been deeply shocked that she didn't receive support. In response to my sister-in-law's statement, my mother-in-law slumped right there. Then my sister-in-law, without even looking at my mother-in-law, headed towards the living room, and with a newspaper that was on the table, she gave my husband a good solid smack on the head. "Hey, who made Vivian's belly grow big, huh? Are you shameless enough to play smartphone games without a care?" She yelled like that.
Well, huh?"
My husband seemed unable to grasp the sudden situation. "Huh? That's not it. How can you not notice that your wife is being mistreated by your mother? Are you stupid?" My sister-in-law tried to grab my husband, but my father-in-law stopped her.
"Everly, calm down."
My sister-in-law glared at my father-in-law. "You too, Dad. What's with this awkward silence? When I brought my husband for the marriage introduction, didn't you say something to him, Dad? You told him that after getting married, he should prioritize and cherish your daughter the most. So what's with this situation? I mean, your son's wife is pregnant, and he's just playing games, ignoring her." She stated this firmly, and it seemed to leave my father-in-law speechless. His face turned as pale as a sheet, and he hung his head. In the end, she said to the three of them, "You all need to cool your heads. What a bunch of worthless people!" Saying that, she kicked my husband, parents-in-law, and husband out of the house. The family house fell into silence. My sister-in-law turned around with a huff, as if she remembered my presence. "Oh, I'm sorry, Vivian. I raised my voice. I hope the baby didn't get startled. Is everything okay?" Saying that, she started to appear flustered, completely different from her earlier determination. I found her behavior a bit amusing and couldn't help but laugh. "Huh, Vivian? What's wrong? I was genuinely worried." Yeah, sorry. I understand, Everly. Thank you for being there for me." When I actually said thank you, for some reason, it brought tears to my eyes. Emotions I had been suppressing all this time suddenly burst out. For me, my sister-in-law's words and actions in this situation meant a lot, as I had felt like I had no allies. My impression of my sister-in-law had shifted in a positive direction since this incident. While my sister-in-law looked at me with a mix of confusion and concern, she repeatedly apologized to me. She apologized for not noticing and not being able to do anything until now, for her own mother's mistreatment, and even for her brother's behavior, saying, "I'm really sorry, even though he's my brother." But of course, my sister-in-law had no need to apologize for this situation. My mother-in-law, who had engaged in such malicious behavior, was at fault, as were my father-in-law and husband, who had turned a blind eye, and I for staying silent and not seeking help from those around me. I said to my sister-in-law, "Don't worry, everything is fine now." I said that, and we had dinner that I had prepared together. Afterward, my sister-in-law kindly drove me home, and a few hours later, my husband, who had probably received quite a talking to from my sister-in-law, came home. His attitude had changed dramatically from before.
"Vivian, I'm really sorry for everything before. I'll make sure this never happens again."
He said that. I reported this to my sister-in-law. "That's good then. But if something like this happens again next time, don't hesitate to divorce, okay?" She said that. Of course, I have the same intention. My mother-in-law also came to my house with my father-in-law after that and made a proper apology. "I'm really sorry. We were wrong." Since then, my mother-in-law hasn't summoned me to their family house, and the mistreatment has stopped. Of course, my husband hasn't brought up visiting his family house since then either. Thanks to this, I've been able to relax and enjoy the rest of my pregnancy. All of this is thanks to my sister-in-law. Since then, my sister-in-law and I have been in frequent contact, occasionally even talking on the phone. We have light-hearted conversations and get along so well that it now feels like a true friendship. Once I've settled down a bit after giving birth, I plan to visit their family house again. When I mentioned this to my sister-in-law, she said, "Let me know when you go to my parents' house because I'm worried about you. My family will also plan our visit accordingly." She said that. It's really reassuring. I felt it from the bottom of my heart that having my sister-in-law is truly a good thing. I'm sure things will be okay from now on. I feel like I can get along reasonably well with my mother-in-law and husband too. My sister-in-law played a big part in making me feel that way. If she ever faces difficulties, I want to be there to help her. With that thought in mind, I go about my daily life.